For 8 months, Christian Crusaders laid siege to the port city of Acre in Palestine. It was one of the great sieges in history. But who were the besiegers and the besieged? And why did the 2-year-long operation halt the reconquest of the Holy Land by Egyptian Sultan Saladin and helped ensure the survival of a truncated Crusader kingdom there for another century? Let's find out in today's episode of history's greatest sieges. In the months following Saladin's great victory over the Crusaders in the Battle of Hattin on July 4th, 1187, the Muslims reconquered much of the territory of the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem. Acre surrendered without a fight on July 10th. Jerusalem followed on October 2nd after resisting for less than 2 weeks. Saladin had taken as prisoner King Guy, ruler of the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem since 1186, but had freed Guy on the promise that he would not again fight against the Muslims. Although Guy was able to secure a ruling from the Catholic Church that the oath he had taken in captivity was null and void, he was without a kingdom. The fall of Jerusalem prompted the Third Crusade, however, and brought Christian reinforcements under Archbishop Ubaldo of Pisa, as well as Sicilian mercenaries. On August 28, 1189, Guy began an ineffectual siege of Acre. An assault several days later failed, and Guy appealed to the Christian states for additional assistance. A Danish fleet arrived in September and placed Acre under blockade from the sea. Ships from other European states joined this effort, and Conrad of Montferrat, who had established a kingdom at Tyre, lent troops. In October, the Crusaders assaulted Acre again, but were halted in bitter fighting. Saladin sought reinforcements from Muslim powers as far away as Spain. With this support, in both October and December, he was able to pass ships through the Christian naval blockade and bring supplies and men into Acre. He also began a land counter-siege of King John's forces. Both sides built extensive trench systems and fortifications, with those of the Crusaders facing in 2 directions. Conrad was nevertheless able to get vital supplies to Guy by sea. Using these supplies during the winter of 1189, the Christians built 3 large siege towers and moved them against the city walls. On May 1st, 1190, Saladin launched an attack on the Christian siege lines. The fighting was intense, and Saladin's attacks forced the Crusaders to fight on both fronts, allowing the defenders of Acre to burn the Crusaders' siege towers. During the summer of 1190, more Christian reinforcements arrived, chiefly from France. The most important figure among the new Crusaders was Henry of Troyes, Count of Champagne, who took command of siege operations. In October, Germans from the army of Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa arrived, but without Frederick, who had drowned in June. The besieging Crusaders constructed both rams and trebuchets for another assault on Acre, but the defenders were again able to destroy the siege engines with inflammatory devices and beat back several major assaults. In November, the Crusaders succeeded in opening a land supply route. That winter, however, Saladin was able to close it off and isolate the Crusaders again. The winter of 1190-1191 was especially severe and hard on the Crusaders, now suffering from disease and famine. Among the victims were Guy's wife Sibylle and their daughters. The Christians would have broken off the siege had it not been for the hope of English and French reinforcements that spring. As promised, additional Christian manpower, ships, supplies, and money arrived. On April 20th, 1191, French King Philippe II Augustus, and on June 8th, English King Richard I, the Lionhearted. Their arrival created a new sense of hope and enthusiasm among the Crusaders. With additional warships, the Crusader forces were at last able to cut off Acre entirely from the seaborne resupply. On land, the Crusaders constructed a large number of trebuchets and other artillery pieces and a large siege tower. The Crusaders concentrated their attacks on one tower, known as the Accused. With Acre in dire straits, Saladin attempted to draw off the Crusaders on July 3rd. This attack, led by his nephew, failed. The Crusaders had now opened a number of breaches in the city walls. Although the defenders repulsed 3 assaults, the city finally surrendered on July 12, 1191. Acre served as the chief military base for King Richard I and his reconquest of much of the coast of Palestine to Jaffa thereafter. Exactly 100 years later, there was another Siege of Acre. This time, the Crusaders defended the city against a Muslim Turkish attack. The Ottomans were victorious, capturing this last Christian enclave in Palestine in May 1291. The victors then filled in the harbour. Acre was again the site of a famous siege in 1799, when Napoleon Bonaparte and his army of Egypt tried unsuccessfully to take the city. Failure here forced Napoleon to retreat back to Cairo,